Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and the recent news that we've been getting on the DLC lately has been making me think a lot, more specifically about the start positions. As you are aware, there's a lot of different start positions for Total War Warhammer, there's a lot of different playable characters, and we're about to get 3 more paid for the new DLC, which for some reason doesn't have a name yet, and a FLC Legendary Lord for Khorne. That has been confirmed a while back. So the current confirmed Legendary Lords are Skulltaker for Khorne, Golgfag Maneater for the Ogre Kingdoms, and Gorbad Ironclaw for the Greenskins. It's also quite important to note here that we don't know the FLC Legendary Lord, but we do know it's for Khorne, and a very educated guess could say Arbal the Undefeated, mostly because Scar Bloodwrath, another contender for the Legendary Lord spot, has now been made into a Legendary Hero. That was confirmed earlier this week. So for the sake of this video, unless Creative Assembly decide to throw a fastball and just give us Karbanda, which I very much doubt, I am imagining that we'll get a Mortal Lord as the FLC Legendary Lord, and it's going to be Arbal. The other thing that we need to talk about, which I think is going to be quite relevant here, we know that Wurrzag has been moved. He's actually been moved into the Southlands in the jungles, so it's pretty interesting because that area has now been opened up, which could mean that one of the new Legendary Lords will be around that area. And the last thing that we need to talk about is, remember a while back they did confirm that there was going to be map changes in Total War Warhammer for patch 6.0. However, I do still think that that was previous plans that might have been changed over, especially considering the fact that what should have been next would have been the Slaanesh DLC, but was then turned into the Khorne DLC. So yeah, don't expect map changes. If it happens, great, I'd love to see more, but I'm not really thinking it's going to happen this patch. Alright, we're going to start off with Skulltaker, and keep in mind that these are all educated guesses, but I imagine that they could easily put him up in the Northern Chaos Wastes. That's mostly because there's a few minor factions up there, and it just kind of makes sense as we currently have Scarbrand down in the Badlands. A little bit of faction diversity in terms of start positions is always quite good. Valkyria is very close by, yes, but she can be more of an ally than anything else. Unless Creative Assembly have figured out multi-faction, multi-race confederation where you'd be able to get Valkyria, then I could imagine Skulltaker up there. There's a pretty well-known faction up there, and it's kind of great. Allows him to kind of push out wherever he wants as soon as he takes over Sigvald, and then he can start killing off other factions to get his faction buffs, which has already been confirmed by Creative Assembly in their recent dev video. Now, I could also imagine him being a teleporter, very similar to that of Oxyotl, which could be quite interesting as he could then appear, kill a faction lord, disappear somewhere else. It's kind of embedded into his lore, it's exactly what he's known for. He just appears, challenges someone, and then disappears. So having a base of operations in the Northern Chaos Wastes makes perfect sense. I'd see some people arguing that he might pop into Lustria, because remember that this DLC is Immortal Empires exclusive, there's no Realm of Chaos stuff. But for a character like Skulltaker, he'd need to be around the more humanoid nations so he can, well, relive his lore. It's, you know, attack a place in Bretonnia. He also wants revenge on the Empire because of Sigmar defeating him. So again, perfect sense. Alright, we're moving on to the Ogres with Golgfag, and this is where I think some factions can get moved around. Remember when Immortal Empires came out, they got rid of the flybys, so those did not have to be recorded anymore, which meant that they could move characters around easily. That's why Wurrzag is moving, for example, and why Kairos has moved a few times now. So in the case of Golgfag Maneater, you know, one of the most popular ogre characters in the Ogre Kingdoms, and also the reason why the Maneaters are named Maneaters, I could see him being moved down to where Skrog the Slaughterer is right now. I know that sounds weird, but hear me out. Golgfag Maneater was originally introduced as a Dogs of War character, meaning that he makes sense to start in a Dogs of War location. And if he's going to be getting contracts, especially with what has been described in that dev video, it makes sense to put him close enough to the Empire and other human factions that he'll be able to benefit from. Now, I'm not saying that that mechanic is going to be only for human factions, but from a immersion perspective, it just makes perfect sense. It fits with his lore, it fits with the theming, and it is a nice throwback to very old lore too, which Creative Assembly do like to hit on every now and then. That's what happens when you hire a lot of ex-Games Workshop staff that worked on Warhammer Fantasy Battle. So Skrog would have to be moved, which, I don't know, he could be put anywhere. I could say just put him up in the actual Mountains of Morn, more so because well, let's be honest, like Greasus needs a little bit of help. There needs to be something to kind of derail Grimgor a little bit, as Grimgor does a lot of damage, and the Mountains of Morn are large enough to be able to have 2 Ogre Legendary Lords. It makes sense to do that from a theme point of view. I mean, Kislev is much, much smaller and has 2 Lords there. Plus, he'll be closer to the Great Maw, which could be cool if there's some sort of rework in the DLC for the Ogre Legendary Lords, which would be nice. Honestly, I'm not expecting one, but it would be nice just to really make the factions their own. And now, before we move on to Gorbad, we need to talk a little bit about Wurrzag. He's been moved down into the jungles of Lustria. I don't think they said this specific settlement, but either way, I'm kind of hyped up for it because it's a new start, plus a lot more varied enemies. I like playing Wurrzag a lot because I really enjoy the Savage Orcs. It's no secret. I've painted up 200 in the space of 7 days. There'll be a video on that soon. There's just been a delay as to like that video and just a few other tabletop matters, to be honest, but we'll be talking about that later down the line. But for the sake of just moving him, we'll put him in the central jungles as, yeah, I mean, if he was there, I'd be having a good time. I think that would be a great campaign. It would be quite difficult because you'd have to deal with Forek pretty early on, but other than that, at least you're fighting, you know, a few lizardmen, some high elves, some dwarves, some undead, a little bit of everything. Alright, now for Gorbad, and I think the reason why they're moving Wurrzag is to potentially put him in the Northern Badlands, which does make a lot of sense. It's a great place for an orc, it's where his war started off, and you could see him do some pretty good damage pushing into the Empire from there. Ultimately, I could see him either where Wurrzag was, or starting off in Black Crag, which is currently held by a Skaven minor faction. Sure, it's not his area, obviously Black Crag actually belongs to a different orc, but hey, I mean, it's pretty decent enough to be able to start there. You'd be fighting with Skaven, you'd be fighting with some other orcs, and obviously you'd be pushing up forward to deal with Karazakarak before making your way into the Empire. However, as you can see on screen, I have put 2 markers for him, and that's simply because I could see him starting off inside of the Empire too. You see, in one point in his story, he pushes through all of the Empire, smashes Solend, the reason why Solend was pretty much destroyed and absorbed by Wissenland, and then started his campaign and met his ultimate end at the area of Reichland as he was besieging Altdorf, I believe. Both of them are entirely possible. I would preferably go with number 1. That's because there's way too much happening in the Empire as it stands. It's a bit of a shit show. And if we do get an orc inside of the Empire, it would be lovely just to see a Forest Goblin Lord in the future because, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. That's where a massive concentration of the Forest Goblins are. And I personally, I don't know about you guys or even Creative Assembly, but I would personally love to see the representation of all the orc subcultures eventually in game. We have standard orcs, standard goblins, night goblins, savage orcs, black orcs. We're going to get another standard orc too, which is really, really good. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of Gorbad. But it would be nice to see a proper Forest Goblin character introduced. So that means that we got all the key ones from the old army books. And lastly, the FLC Legendary Lord, which we do know belongs to Khorne. Like I said, it's likely Arbal. There's nobody else, and Scar has now been turned into a legendary hero. So, yeah, Arbal or Kabanda. Kabanda is like a 1% chance. Arbal 99 at this point. There have been loads of like rumors for him on the tabletop getting a brand new model, so it kinda, you know, fits if those rumors are true, but then again, those rumors start off like 2 years in advance when Games Workshop actually released them. Anyways, if it is Arbal, I'm expecting him in Norska. I know, not the best start. Norska is quite congested as it is, but I imagine that they'll put in Arbal there because it fits with his lore, as he is a Norscan himself. Now, he does have some lore around the end times, which, by the way, a lot of the characters do have their end time specific start position, such as Skarbrand and Festus, so maybe we could see the map opening up and going a little bit into Ind, because his end times lore does actually go to Ind. But the reason why I think Norska is the biggest possibility here is really because I think a Norska DLC is coming up at some point. Well, they've said, you know, they want to do something for Norska, and they'll likely move Wulfric away for that to make him the actual Wanderer, possibly starting off in Skeggi, which ultimately would be a good start, actually. I'm thinking Norska. I think it's way too early to see Ind open up. If we were going to see the Slaanesh DLC, which a lot of people have been thinking Slaanesh, High Elves, and Dark Elves, I could see Ind opening up very small there, especially to build up for the Monkey King. But I think that one character hidden away would just be pointless to open up that area. We also don't know the narrative of this DLC, or if there will be a narrative, considering that none of these races are really attached to each other in that sense. Thrones of Decay was more the Empire versus Nurgle, and then the Dwarves did their own thing. So if they're going for a pure no narrative and just going, hey, yeah, we're just going to stick Arbal over there, it could be doable, actually. You know, go up and fight Grand Cafe, have a small area, show off the Mountains of Heaven, and kind of hint up, hey, Monkey King is coming soon. Again, this is all speculation, but I've been thinking about this a lot, especially since that recent dev diary. It's like, oh wow, this is actually ramping up. So yeah, I figured it would be a nice thing to talk about. You guys might have some different opinions on where the start positions would be, and maybe even for the FLC Legendary Lords. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. I do apologize for the lack of streams lately, by the way. I've just been busy, been sorting out some administration stuff on the back end, which unfortunately takes way too long. Way too long. But I'll see you all again very, very soon.